So in this video I wanted to give an overview of the Cloud DCM1e network controlled zone mixer. The product is particularly special because it's one of the few products on the market that can do 8 zones, 6 of which are mono, 2 of which zone 1 and 2 are stereo left and right. And it can do this in a very flexible and unified way, in the sense that a mixture of the zones can be controlled locally with the remote wall plate. A mixture of them can be, controlled in the same manner but with a group. These can be added and removed at any given point in time, so that maybe if you've got a function room, that they sometimes are part of a member of groups, but then other times when the rooms are separated back off, they're all individual again. The product, like a lot of other cloud products, has the option for remote input plates, which are effectively just a remote connection of balanced audio with power supply sent to the plate, and the unit deals with it accordingly. But what's quite exciting about the Cloud DCM1, obviously, it's one of their few products, and I think it's probably one of maybe 3 to 4 products that actually offers stereo audio, because the CX263 does on zone 1 only, the CX163 does, the CX261 does. However, other than this product, I'm not aware of really any other cloud product that does this stereo audio. It's almost always mixed down to mono in the preamp stage. So the DCM1 gives you full zone control of each area: music, level, input, EQ. Your groups, should you have made groups for each zone, you can basically turn them on and off at any given time and tell the system which group has what zones as a member of it. Inputs, you can make these available or unavailable to the respective zones should you not want those to be accessible for whatever reason. Maybe you've got an input that's more sensitive or it's private, I don't know. Security. See, the frustrating thing with the DCM1 in my view is that the settings here are not persistent across multiple machines. They are very much so saved in the cookies of the web browser. So if I went onto another machine and I set up, I don't know, mic input enable as installer and user, that setting wouldn't persist on that other machine. So that's something to bear in mind. And that isn't a limitation on the 46120 CDI card, which is interesting, which uses almost the same interface and highly likely maybe even the same microcontroller. Labelling, so you can completely rename all the inputs, and these will also show on the remote plate. So if I show you a picture of one, basically on that display you can see there it's been saved as TV radio. You'd be able to change the names, and obviously in here you can do it. Traditionally on the DCM1 you'd have to do it on the front panel, but with the web version you're able to do it on here. Again, those settings persist to the browser in a weird way, so if I then went on the unit and renamed it on the front panel, the web browser wouldn't see the new name. I'd have to then refresh that automatically, which is a bit cumbersome, but certainly not the end of the world. You've got kind of status screens that show whether the gates are open and if the paging's active, which again is quite cool. Again, network, got all these settings. That's just basic layer 2 networking configured. Device info. We've also got the message groups. So if you've got a PMSA spot announced, whether it's the PM4SA or the PM8SA, it's probably going to be the PM8 because it's an 8-zone unit. You can trigger those message groups remotely, which is interesting that it says message 1 to message 8. That would denote that it would trigger M_1 or M_8 on the Cloud SD card. However, that's not correct. It's actually addressing groups A to H, and a message group is where basically you define a chime. You don't have to, you can even turn the chime off, to be honest, but you define a message with the chime if you want the chime, and the zones it's going to address for each one of those 8 groups. So for instance, you could have a CCTV warning that only plays on the outside zone. The options really are endless, to be honest. But what's exciting is typically these are activated on the mic itself with the push buttons on there. The microphone also has contact closure, but this gives you an entire web interface, so anywhere on the network you could look at your CCTV camera. If someone's doing something they shouldn't be in the garden or something, you'd be able to trigger it remotely. I mean, I took this feature set one step further with my personal system, and this is obviously in my house as a bit of a project or an interest hobby. It's something I've liked for many years. I'll get onto that later. And really that kind of brings it to an end with regards to the actual main interface of the DCM1e. There's not a huge amount that can be configured. There is in fact more features available on the front panel of the unit. What I did, however, though, to take it one step further, is the product limitation of DCM1 and the mic input specifically. And there's a situation I've come across many times over the years, and that is most, if not all, cloud products have got a Vox priority function on the mic inputs, where if there's a mic signal present, it will duck the music on each zone, which is quite a standard feature set, whereas the DCM1 on the paging mic requires access control. There is no kind of Vox only. There is Vox, so you can have it so that once the access is given to open up the zones, it will fade straight after the voice is finished, or it will just stay up for the whole duration of the access port is enabled. For me, the latter is the more logical option. There is obviously a Vox on the mic extension input, but the problem with it is because of how the product's architected, and I'm not aware of whether it's a software or a hardware limitation, the Vox ducking does work, but it's the drawback of the fact that the mic level is the same across all 8 zones. So you can't change the mic level individually for each area, which if you consider certain areas of a building will have different amplification, different loudspeakers, if it's 100-volt line, different tappings, different wire runs, which all make a difference on the gain and the volume, that is a bit frustrating. But what we have to remember is Cloud have designed the product where the mic inputs and the extension inputs were designed to be contained within each zone. So I wouldn't say it's so much as an oversight, it's just in my use case it kind of caused a bit of a headache. But although it caused the headache, it actually highlighted something that was very interesting about the product, and that is that the zone access control, which is effectively what I needed to enable to allow my remote paging extension to work, can all be controlled over the RS-232 port, and you can also send the same commands as a TCP command to the network port. So I'll show you a script I made the other day. So effectively my IP phone is able to run a HTTP push script when a call is answered or declined. The IP phone is set to auto answer as part of the paging facility I use it for. And if we take a look at the IP phone, you can see quite clearly there the HTTP push script that's going to run. All that is a Windows web server with CGI enabled so that it can run that Python script from a web server. It doesn't really give any output or anything, it just literally runs it on the back end. But what that means is the minute that the IP phone senses the call and the call negotiation establishes, I've got a pre-announcement chime playing, which can be any of the standard cloud chimes in the mic or even any MP3 file you want with the PMSA. And then once that's finished, it will then proceed to open up all the zones until the call is ended. And once the call is ended, this file then runs, which then basically restores the paging back to exactly how it was. So it releases the zones, and these are all commands available in the cloud documentation. And this gives you obviously the same features that you would if you had a PM paging station but anywhere remotely. So I could dial an extension number, the chime of my choice would come through, and that's defined as a message group. I've chosen message group 8 there to try and keep it out of the way of user error. It runs that. Obviously whilst that's in operation, there's an issue here where once the message group that's running the chime has ended, it will then release the zones early and cut off the remote paging call. So what it does is it waits until that's finished, and within milliseconds it opens the zone straight back up again to the point where you don't even notice, particularly if you're waiting for the pre-announcement chime to sound first, in the same behaviour as you would with a PM paging station. And yeah, it works remarkably well. And then you hang up the phone and it restores the music in the same way a paging station would. And a lot of IP phones, the varying quality, I found the E-Link ones are quite good, but this particular phone has had the firmware reflash to Skype for Business. And Skype for Business uses a particularly good codec, which I believe Microsoft carried over to Teams, where the noise cancelling is really good. You don't have much compression, so actually the audio quality of this solution is particularly good. And I wholly believe you could replicate this setup on a 46-120, certainly the Mark 1, which uses the CDI card, which I'll demonstrate in a moment. Just to demonstrate the 46-120 with the CDI card, it is quite a special product, this, because effectively it's like a mini DCM1 really, where you've got the DCM1 digital control, but you've obviously got the 4 times 120 watts of high quality amplification, and if you add in the 100-volt line step-up transformers, you've got an incredibly versatile 2 unit there. On the particular installation I used, it's a charitable trust that restore vehicles, so I don't get any monetary value from installing this system or operating it. It's more again as a hobby. But how I have it set up is the 46120 has the LM2 facility port going in, which is where all the remote inputs from the office PC from the manager's room goes in. The PM4 is in the old radio studio in the back room. I don't give that access to anybody because the people in that building wouldn't necessarily know how to use the zone access, and it would just cause issues. So all I did is just put an XLR paging mic into the LM2, which will do all the music ducking and overriding. It just doesn't have the fancy chime, but hey ho. That's just by the by. But as you can see, similar to the DCM1, and it's timed out at the worst possible time. Same interface. But as I touched on earlier, this is actually better because the PMSA message groups are named correctly for one, and for two, the user security system is far more advanced. And again, it's more advanced in such a way where these settings persist across multiple browsers as well, which is really impressive. It does feel like a bit more thought and time's gone into this, or it's maybe a more mature product, which would make sense, the DCM1 being cloud's first macro-controlled zoner. But yes, this unit, in the same way as the DCM1, will take network control commands to do things like turn the paging on and off, which is quite cool, because you can achieve quite a lot there in a really small unit. But yeah, that's what I wanted to kind of go over in this video, the feature set of the cloud DCM1, the 46120 expansion card. Because I've certainly never seen anything like it before. I've liked cloud products for years. I've largely used all the analog zoners, the CX263 for stereo zones, the Z4, but they don't come close to what you can achieve on this. I think the only limitation with this is you lose maybe the analog remote controls, although in the case of the 46120, I believe, at zone level you can release the web controls and say, actually, no, I still want the RSL6 remote control panel to work in that zone, which is a really unique feature that Cloud have obviously spent a lot of time on. And another thing I would touch on is, in terms of a residential system, which is where I use the DCM1, what I did is I got a really old-fashioned doorbell, which is just a switch, put that in the front of the house, run the wire upstairs into the PM8 SA in message group 6, I believe, and that then sounds in the inside zones via the message group a really old-fashioned sounding doorbell, which is certainly quite cool. And throughout that whole period, the paging stations will all lock out saying busy, so there's no possibility of a clash there. And I'm sure a lot of people will wonder why on earth you'd want a multi-zone sound system in your house, or even more a paging or an announcement system. I suppose for me, it's been a lifetime hobby. So that's why I've done it, but for me, it's just a really cool piece of equipment, really. And the fact it's made in this country just down the road is quite a coincidence, I guess. So I'll wrap the video up here, but that's really just an overview of the cloud digital control system that they have on a number of their products. Thank you for watching.